back home from the tournament. Time to put away all of the stuff that I lent. Oh, it's been a long day.
Welcome back to the Blissful Badger. Last weekend, I went to a tournament. It was my second tournament, and this time the theme was more of a Crusade introductory. For a lot of people, they're going to be able to take some of their special characters that earned points and bring them forward into the new Crusade. So, more thematic armies, legends were allowed. So I heard legends were allowed, and I went, oh, I'm absolutely going to bring some legends to my list. So it was going to require a 2,000 point roster, and you could play either a 1,500 point game of 40k, or you could play a 500 point boarding action game. And your roster, depending on whether you were going to play one or the other or both, your roster had to have options for either. So you could actually play a valid list. Well, I have some Legends models that I've never been able to field before, and so I decided to play Tyranids. And my main force was going to be made up of my Barbed Hierodual, Scythed Hierodual, and Dimachairon, with a Malanthrope as my warlord. Because if you remember back at the beginning of the year, I decided it was finally time to paint up some of my Tyranids that I've had for a very long time, especially since they were legends. So I knew I wanted to play Tyranids, and I knew I wanted to run a whole bunch of legends. So I built a list to fit boarding actions and a 1,500 point list of a regular game, and started working on that. So, over the last couple of weeks, I painted up all of my Zoanthropes, all of my Venomthropes, my 6 Raveners, and 22 Neurogons. Now, as I was painting the Raveners, they released the Typhon box, and they changed the unit size to 5 instead of 3. Because of that, and because the rules were questionable whether or not they would be one way or another, I asked the tournament organizer early on, and I was like, it's not worth running the Raveners, so I did change the um, boarding actions I was thinking about running that list, and I changed my overall roster because I still had time. And so I built a different list and ended up with a really decent assortment of models, but with nearly half of my models being, well, half of my points being Legends units. I didn't have a whole lot of flexibility in what I was going for, and I figured, it's a thematic game tournament, so it shouldn't be that bad bringing things that weren't going to be super helpful in certain matchups. So I'm not usually one to play tournaments, and I do choose more thematic ones to play in. This is, again, my second one. The first one was the Highlander one from early this year. So, other than the Highlander tournament, this was my second. I don't have a lot of experience with tournaments, and I knew going in that playing a Scythe Hierodual and a Barbed Hierodual in each game was going to be a little bit rough. They are knight points and have a 2-up save and 18 wounds, but they don't have an invuln against anything. And all of their weapons, except for melee, are quite weak overall. Um, for taking 670 points in two models, you would think that they would hit a little bit harder at range, but I knew what I was getting into. So the morning of the tournament arrived, and I arrived, and it was great seeing some of my painted terrain and mats being used because I always allow the tournaments to borrow my stuff. The shop is not set up to have enough for, was it 26 players? So it was really cool seeing my stuff being used. And my first opponent was Tau. He had an interesting list of fruit and normal Tau models. And overall, my list was fairly good because he had a lot of infantry. And I chose Invasion Fleet, so I was able to get sustained 1 on everything. So that was really good. And I also decided, because it was a thematic game, the whole tournament, that for every model I killed, I would eat a Skittle. Because I am High Fleet Skittle, after all. So this game allowed me to eat quite a few Skittles. My 18-inch flamer on the Scythed Hierodule is quite a shock for people who are not aware of it, but they are just torrents. A torrent weapon without ignore cover, as it happens. Um, I mean, it's a legend unit, so those rules are probably never going to be seen and modified again, but yeah, it is a torrent weapon with no ignores cover. Yep. Um, so first game went well. I did manage to consume quite a bit of biomass, and I did end up winning versus the Tau opponent. Going into the second round, I went up against Imperial Fists, and we ended up with a mission that had me as the defender and the Imperial Fists as the attacker. And this felt extremely weird and backwards thematically. And so I actually talked with the opponent, and we are going to run the same match again in the future with the Tyranids as the attacker and the Imperial Fists as the defender. But we followed along with the TO's instructions, and I will say that my list. Oh, I did swap out the Dimacaron for some extra Hormagaunts and Synapse because I realized I had 2 units of Synapse in the first game, and I figured that would be a good change. Um, so I set up in the defender zone and we started playing. So, as a good Imperial Fists player, my opponent did have 3 Hammerfall bunkers, and it definitely made it an interesting game when the attacker was pretty much castled up in the smaller deployment zone. So my big creatures did not want to get overwatched, and so they were kind of holding back a little bit, and my point values were not going very well. And so I ended up drawing my objectives of taking out a vehicle unit. And it's actually kind of funny about the vehicle unit issue. So, two Firestrike servo turrets in a single unit, you don't just kill one and get unit kill. So, I tried quite hard to kill his two servo turret squad, and I actually failed. 2 rounds of shooting with my barbed hierodule and scythed hierodule was not able to kill 2 servo turrets. Oh, and zoanthropes. I had zoanthropes going into him as well. So that was a little bit rough. Um, I knew that going in, my list was going to be a little bit harder to deal with vehicles because all of my ranged shooting was strength 9. Um, but I figured I would be able to get into combat if the map had any decent amount of terrain. Um, Sadly, this particular map had a nice 8-inch wide kill zone right outside of his deployment zone. So I was not able to get any of my big creatures into combat. One of mine actually died in Overwatch, which was what I was afraid of. I'm sure that Strength 15 would have done quite well against the Hammerfall bunkers. But his Hammerfall bunkers and servo turrets with some Vindicators right behind them, uh, it was quite hard for me to do anything. And ended up scoring, I think, 19 points total in that game. And 10 of that was for having a fully painted army. So it was kind of rough. I do look forward to the rematch where I'm the attacker instead of the defender. We'll see how that one runs. Now, 2 1,500 point games. We've gone most of the day already. It's time for game 3. Now, I've won one game, I've lost one game, and I'm about to go up against Blood Angels. Blood Angels, who have some tanks. And I'm okay with that. We have a castle in the middle that they're protecting, and he has a bunch of guys, and I have a bunch of guys. And then things start looking interesting. With the infiltrate rule, I could only infiltrate a few inches up from the corners that I had. And he was able to go first. So he infiltrated his models first, which meant that I had very little option in where I placed my guys. Okay, that setup not being great is not very fun, and knowing that he had some vehicles after my previous game, seeing how I did against those, and seeing what he had and where he had to do things to score, this was gonna be a rough game. But still, Tyranids versus Blood Angels. I mean, what better way to do things? I mean, you had the Imperial Fist versus Tyranids earlier. It was nice StarCraft feel to it. So now we have Starship Troopers. I don't know, it's cool. Okay, so I had my Hormagaunts charge his Sanguinary Guard, and then he told me about the -1 to hit and -1 to wound. And I actually asked him, should I even roll? And he didn't know what I was talking about. So I said, okay, fine, here you go. And I rolled my to hit, and I rolled my to wound, and he rolled his saves, and 10 Hormagaunts with 30 attacks dealt 0 wounds. And so my opponent went, huh, and swung back and wiped the unit of Hormagaunts. So we kept on going. He was like, I thought those were something different. Fair enough. I mean, Tyranids are all sorts of different things, probably thinking they were gene stealers. Um, so I moved forward. I we had an 18-inch maximum range for firepower, so my barbed hierodule didn't do anything turn 1 except for move forward. Um, I threw another unit of Hormagaunts at his models. I tried to position my Von Ryan's Leapers so that they could do some damage. They did a little bit. Um, again, going up against Sanguinary Guard, they're not very strong. For a third game in a row, Mal just sat back and protected himself. Um, so anyway, my Scythed Hierodule had the option to flame his Sanguinary Guard. And this is where I actually found out about that no ignores cover. So that was actually kind of shock that there is a torrent weapon that does not ignore cover. So on top of that, my barbed hierodule was able to shoot at his gladiator, and he decided to pop smoke and armor of contempt. And I was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, I am. I want to protect that." And I was like, um, okay. And so I fired. I did my shooting and everything, and I dealt 1 damage to him. And so I got another, huh, from my opponent. So I'm on the back foot here. I'm losing by score a little bit. I'm holding my own a little bit, but I'm throwing squad after squad after squad at these guys. And he's just eating them up. His Sanguinary Guard's still alive. It's just 1 squad. I've thrown 4 units at it already. Still not doing anything. It's still not even below half strength. So his Gladiator shoots back at my Barbed Hierodule on his turn. And he does 17 damage to it. It's down to 1 wound now. And he was like, "You don't have an invuln or anything?" And I was like, "Nope." And I got another, from him. At the time, I was just tired. But looking back at it, that was such a hilarious thing that I think there were another 2 situations that came up where, huh, came up. And just, I mean, post post game looking at it from outside after I've been rested a little bit. It was hilarious. And I'm looking at it and it's so funny. Um but yeah, it was a good 3 games. I knew I, I knew going in I was going to lose more than win, but I had to have some fun. I didn't eat very many Skittles in games 2 or 3, which is probably a good thing. I didn't need to eat a whole lot of sugar, but it was fun. And I do look forward to the next tournament. Um, I think I will probably go for something a little bit stronger versus vehicles because in Warhammer 40,000, I've realized that if you have something that's really good at taking out vehicles, it can still kill infantry. But if you only have things that can kill infantry, that might not work versus vehicles. So I think I might tailor my list a little bit stronger against vehicles next time. But it was a hilarious time. I had a lot of fun, and I got to play my Legends Tyranids. So I can finally say that I've done that, and I get another game in against the Imperial Fists. So I'll get to see how that goes. And yeah, it was really fun. Maybe next time, I don't know, maybe I should have played a boarding action game with my Tyranids that might have been a little bit stronger for me. Um, but it was quite fun. I wasn't worried about the um, special abilities enhancements going forward because I don't actually think I'm going to play my Tyranids in that Crusade. I think I'm going to take a different army with me into the Crusade. But I have a couple of weeks left before I have to decide on that. So I'm going to relax and work on a couple of smaller projects and ruminate on how the games went. And some of the memories are just hilarious. Um, I don't remember exactly which game it was, but one of my leadership roles while in Synapse was triple ones. So yeah, even still, failing Synapse. Yep, yep, that was pretty cool. Um, Not a single time did I use Shadow in the Warp. There was never a point where it seemed to make the most sense to use. And thinking back, maybe I could have done that to try to make that charge and not get overwatched, but I don't think it would have mattered in game 2. I didn't need to worry about it in game 1, and game 3 was kind of a massacre. So it just never came up. But I've been rambling for a little while, so I am looking forward to the next tournament. We'll see what it is, and I will hopefully take even more pictures next time. I was a little bit light on them, but at the same time, I was in the moment and enjoying myself.
Subscribe if you haven't so that you don't miss any future videos. I also want to thank my patrons and supporters for making these videos possible. And until next time, I hope you find your bit of bliss.